It would have been, I don't know, maybe 2016 in the last cycle during all the ICO stuff. It was the first time I heard of Ethereum. I had heard of Bitcoin. And then when kind of DeFi really kicked off in a big way in 2020, I just became like full on obsessed, where I was spending, more than a full-time job's worth of time in DeFi every week, probably from then till now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Edge Podcast. I'm DeFi Dad from Fourth Revolution Capital, and I'm here with my friend and co-host from 4RC Nomadic. Today's show is a shorter episode we do called Quick Hits, where we spotlight new and trending DeFi projects and teams. Our goal is to produce these when new and interesting opportunities in DeFi present themselves, so that you might gain some edge on your peers. For example, in this episode, we'll cover the recently launched Gravita Protocol, which is a friendly fork of Liquity designed to provide users with interest-free loans backed by ETH Liquid Staking Tokens, such as rETH by Rocket Pool or stETH by Lido. If you listen regularly to the Edge podcast, we've previously covered the journey of Rocket Pool to become a top ETH decentralized liquid staking protocol. So here's an example of a protocol building with the battle-tested ETH LST rETH and benefiting from the pioneering work of Rocket Pool and Lido, among others. But before we do, just a quick word from our sponsors who make the Edge podcast possible.
MANTLE, a DAO-governed ecosystem of decentralized and token-governed technologies powered by MANTLE's native token, MNT. Its flagship product, MANTLE Network, is a high-performance Ethereum Layer 2 network built with modular architecture. At MANTLE, we're passionate about supporting builders and created a milestone-based grants program for promising Web3 projects. Calling for ambitious Web3 entrepreneurs. Visit mantle.xyz/grants and apply for it today.
Whether you're a trader, farmer, analyst, or newbie, you can trade smart with KYBERSWAP, the OG decentralized exchange and aggregator on 13 chains. Swap at the best rates, farm with real yields, set limit orders, use their proprietary trading and AI tools with the best UX in DeFi, securely and permissionlessly. Get better rates, better opportunities, better alpha, and a better trading experience. Trade smart now at kyberswap.com. GTRADE by Gains Network is a decentralized leveraged trading platform allowing users to synthetically trade crypto, forex, stocks, and commodities with up to 1000x leverage. GTRADE is live on both Polygon and Arbitrum, with over 30 billion in all-time trading volume and nearly 50 million in vault liquidity. The platform has consistently been among the top earning protocols, with 7-figure monthly revenue and a net deflationary token. GTRADE has become an on-chain stable for both traders and yield seekers. Check them out at gains.trade or by searching Gains Network on Twitter. The future of Web3 is bright, but crypto startups, DAOs, and on-chain organizations can't scale without tooling to power world-class financial and payment operations. Introducing Utopia, your all-in-one platform to create, execute, and understand your Gnosis-safe transactions. Execute payroll 10x faster through automated payment plans. Coordinate reimbursements and accounts payable through payment requests. Execute multi-sig transactions faster with your global team through signing links. View, label, and categorize all of your safe transactions in one place. Start managing your on-chain payments today by going to utopialabs.com. To get started with gasless payments, message Utopia's co-founder on Twitter at 0xkaito.
It all started so simply with CryptoKitties and Maker on Ethereum, but quickly became complex with more applications and many chains. Today, everyone agrees UX issues are the biggest blocker standing in the way of crypto adoption. Introducing Avocado. Multi-chain UX redesigned from the ground up. The first wallet to abstract networks, accounts, and gas. One gas tank to pay transaction fees on all chains. In USDC. And native access to Instadapp's powerful, custom DeFi strategies. Avocado, one wallet to rule all chains.
All right, in just a moment, we'll introduce Rhett Shipp. He is the founder of Gravita. Rhett previously worked at Ernst & Young, eventually shifting to work on AI-based applications as a data scientist. In 2022, he worked on the investment team at Wave Financial, a digital asset management firm, which, among other things, has a venture capital arm very invested in DeFi and Web3. Just a few weeks ago, on May 17th, 2023, he officially launched Gravita, which we'll talk all about today as an early example of what's being called LSTfi. So let's kick it off. Rhett, welcome to the Edge podcast. How are you doing?
Doing great. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making time to join us. I know it's been a busy few weeks, and we actually recently recorded a podcast with Austin Barak of CoinFund, and we were talking about just how enormous the addressable markets could be for LSTs. And so downstream from that then is LSTfi, which again is, I think, a really appropriate way to describe Gravita. But before we talk about Gravita, Rhett, do you want to walk us through a bit more about just who you are and your background? I'd love to learn the story of how did you ever get involved in crypto?
Yeah, good question. So as you mentioned earlier, I was previously working as a data scientist, and it would have been, I don't know, maybe 2016 in the last cycle during all the ICO stuff. It was the first time I heard of Ethereum. I had heard of Bitcoin in the long past, and when I was working at EY, I remember debating it with some coworkers. Some were like very in favor, some were very against, and I was kind of like, I'm not quite sure if there's something here or not. And a friend told me about Ethereum in that last cycle, and I just got super excited about all the things you could build on top of a platform like that. And then I heard an interview, did a few things there, and then I got really, really interested in DeFi after hearing an interview with Rhett Christensen talking about MakerDAO before MakerDAO even launched. And it was this interesting, like, oh, can you make a stable coin that works this way as opposed to what Tether does? And if you can, that could be a really big deal. And have just pretty closely followed the space ever since. And then when kind of DeFi really kicked off in a big way in 2020, I just became like full on obsessed, where I was spending, more than a full-time job's worth of time in DeFi every week, probably from then till now, even before I kind of left that the data science position.
Maybe before we dive into Gravita, Rhett, would you be able to briefly define the term LST, and then maybe talk to us a bit about what is LSTfi? We're hearing that phrase crop up everywhere now. Would love your take and perspective.
Yeah, sure. So an LST is a liquid staking token, and mostly talked about in the context of Ethereum. So Ethereum is a proof of stake network. If you have 32 ETH, you can spin up a validator. You are validating the blockchain and being paid to do so, but those assets are kind of illiquid. So these protocols allow you to deposit some of your ETH, allow someone else to run a validator for you, and they give you a receipt token that represents the ETH you deposited plus the yield that they're generating. So we call those LSTs. LSTs and staking in general just got significantly de-risked recently when withdrawals were enabled. That really makes it a lot easier to safely support them in DeFi. Because you can both deposit and withdraw out of those systems, it makes it easier to kind of predict the price of a liquid staking token relative to the assets that are underlying it. And so what we're seeing now is a lot more liquid staking projects cropping up, which is great. We love competition there. And then B, a lot more of the DeFi protocols are feeling like they can safely support those assets for lending and borrowing and various other things.
Hey, with that background, why don't we talk then more about Gravita? I'm wondering if you can start to explain why might it seem a bit familiar to DeFi users. It feels like there's moving parts here that we've all used. And yeah, how would you dumb it down for folks who are new to Gravita?
So Gravita is a friendly Liquity fork. So if you're very familiar with Liquity, the mechanisms are almost the same. There are a few differences. One is that it's multi-collateral, focused on liquid staking tokens as opposed to single collateral. And the second, probably most important difference is that in both systems, you pay a one-time kind of loan origination fee. In the Gravita system, that one-time fee is basically charged over 6 months, which makes it an attractive borrowing experience for both the short-term and the long-term borrowers, as opposed to being just more attractive for long-term borrowers. And then, more broadly, it's kind of, you'd call it in the same category as MakerDAO and some of those others, where it's protocol to peer lending. You're minting GRAI, the debt token. It's our version of like DAI or LUSD in order to borrow, and then you pay that back and it's burned in order to get your collateral back.
You've kind of defined some of the early steps and how somebody like a user would interact with Gravita, but maybe kind of just walk us through the whole flow, maybe step by step if you can, and just give everybody an idea of kind of how to use Gravita protocol.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a few ways to use it. So if you don't mind, I'll talk through a couple of these. So for someone who wants to borrow against their liquid staking tokens, in order to either take leverage or maybe do a real world purchase or something like that, the way that it works is you come in, you deposit, you choose how much of that collateral to deposit into the system, and then you can borrow up to a certain loan to value amount. And that borrow, you mint GRAI. So say I deposit $100,000 worth of rETH, and then I can mint up to about $85,000 worth of GRAI. I wouldn't recommend minting right up to the max, because then you'll be right at the liquidation threshold. Let's say you mint 20,000 GRAI. If you want to do a real world purchase or you want to lever up, then you would go into the one of the DEX pools. There's a big USDC GRAI pool, for instance. You would come swap into USDC, offboard, and buy a car. Or if you wanted to lever up, you'd swap into USDC, swap back into rETH, and maybe add it to your collateral position. So that's the typical way to open a what we call a vessel, open a debt position. But there are other ways to use the system as well. So if you're someone who holds USDC and you just want to dollar cost average into ETH, liquidations are processed in Gravita through a stability pool, which basically pro rata burns the deposits in that pool to cover the debt of an over-leveraged borrower and then distributes their collateral amongst those participants. So one way to dollar cost average using our system is you say, I'm going to swap my USDC into GRAI, deposit in the stability pool, and now whenever someone gets liquidated, I am converting my GRAI into those collateral assets at a discount. And so it's a low-cost way to dollar cost average into those assets.
Rhett, can you talk about how Gravita has implemented support for bLUSD, which is derived from Liquity's chicken bonds? I guess why did you all choose to go that route?
Great question. So there's a few reasons. One is that we are a friendly Liquity fork and we want to benefit them. And by supporting bLUSD as a collateral asset, it's very helpful for the health of the chicken bond system. But secondly, stable collateral in a system like this can be really helpful, but we want to stay away from the censorable stables like USDC. bLUSD is LUSD, which we consider extremely robust, censorship resistant, unstoppable, and it's generating baked in yield from the stability pool essentially. So we think it's very safe to our system and we're beneficial to them by supporting it as collateral. It's a special collateral type where if you borrow against bLUSD in our system, you cannot be liquidated. And one thing that we've been super excited about is that by supporting bLUSD in Gravita, we were able to help change the dynamics just enough that it's made it for the first time in the last several months profitable to open chicken bonds again. So that's one of the things that we love them. We think that that's a great system, and we love that we're able to kind of help it get into a higher level of activity again.
Rhett, if we go back to the talk of borrowing or opening a vessel, can you talk to us about the loan to value ratio? It's higher for Gravita. And I guess why is that? How does the system status also play into this? Because this is another detail that I think users need to be well aware of.
Yes. Yeah. Good questions. So you'll notice that if you compare just for ETH, if you compare the allowed loan to value on Liquity versus MakerDAO, you'll notice that it's that Liquity is more forgiving, allows you to borrow more dollars per or more LUSD per dollar of ETH deposited. And there's a few reasons why we can facilitate higher loan to values. One of them is that the stability pool is able to liquidate over leveraged borrowers very quickly. And so you don't have this time component of like auctioning off collateral and things like that. And so that is really helpful in keeping the system solvent. And then the second big thing is, in the case of ourselves, similar to Liquity, liquidations are complete liquidations. So if you get liquidated, all of your debt is burned and all of your collateral is captured. Whereas in MakerDAO and some others, they involve partial liquidations. And there's just kind of a trade-off there where you say, okay, well, we'll let you borrow more against it, where we would liquidate you later, but the liquidation is all of your collateral. So that's a risk to keep in mind, where you say, well, maybe MakerDAO would liquidate me at a less attractive price, but I will still be able to keep some of my collateral after that happens. And that's under normal, when the system is in kind of normal healthy mode, where the system as a whole is highly collateralized. You can borrow 90 cents on the dollar against ETH and 85 cents on the dollar against wrapped stETH and rETH. Right now, we'll be onboarding more collateral assets later. But the system can go into what's called recovery mode. And what that is a way, it's an additional safety measure. And it's similar in Liquity, for those familiar there, where if the system as a whole, for one collateral type, this is collateral by collateral, if for one collateral type, the system becomes less collateralized than we deem very healthy, the system will go into recovery mode. That number right now for all three, wrapped ETH, rETH, and stETH, is about 71% loan to value. So if the overall loan to value for rETH holders is about 71%, then the system goes into recovery mode. And that makes it so that you can get liquidated at a 71% LTV as opposed to 85 against your rETH or your stETH. But in those cases, it is a partial liquidation. But if you want to make sure that you never, ever get liquidated, you want to do one of two things. Either always stay below that 71%, or if you want to borrow it more aggressively, monitor whether the system is at risk of entering recovery mode. Maybe you're someone who wants to be very aggressive and you want to borrow it at an 80% LTV. Watch the system status and you can see how close we are to that, so that you could adjust your position down if the system ever neared recovery mode.
If we go into recovery mode, if Gravita goes into recovery mode, is there any forewarning for folks, or does it just begin those liquidations to get the system LTV back down to 71%?
In our UI, you'll see system status, and it'll kind of tell you we're in healthy mode, we're in caution mode, where we're approaching it. But once it hits recovery mode, then that kicks off automatically. Those partial liquidations, and then essentially people who are already borrowers in the system or new entrants into the system, your activity is kind of limited to the sorts of things that would improve the overall collateralization ratio of the system, right? So if you already have a debt position open and you wanted to borrow more against the collateral that's already in there, which would make the overall collateral ratio of the system worse, it won't let you do that. But it would allow you to pay back or add collateral. It'll allow you to do the things that would pull us back out of recovery mode.
I would imagine in the future, as Gravita grows more, I'm betting that like DeFi Saver, InstaDApp will, have integrations there. And I'm not sure, Rhett, if for Liquity, do you know if DeFi Saver will provide like kind of like a stop loss or like a payback mechanism if Liquity goes into their own recovery mode? Because that's something I could imagine the guys building there. They're always trying to come up with, they call it automation. That's the name of the product. And it's there for like the likes of Aave V2 and V3 and Liquity. And so anyways, that's my hope for a protocol like this, is that we'll eventually see that sort of automation.
Yeah, so DeFi Saver is awesome. I've used it a lot for Liquity, and they do have stop losses. I'm not sure whether they have one that specifically targets a recovery mode sort of status, but they do have stop losses, and you could kind of maybe play with those yourself in order to ensure. What you'll notice with Liquity is as the system has matured, they tend to stay very far away from recovery mode. And during some of the, kind of the 3AC meltdown, et cetera, the overall collateralization ratio of Liquity actually improved during the crisis. And so recovery mode tends to be pretty unlikely. It's pretty rare that it happens. And if you read actually in the Liquity documentation about it, they talk about how the recovery mode existing as a possibility is kind of it reduces the likelihood of it occurring. It's kind of this interesting, I forget how they refer to it, like a self-defeating mechanism or something. And so we hope for the same for us. Like ideally, we never enter recovery mode. It's only there in case of emergency, and hopefully an emergency that just never happens. But it is something to monitor, and that would be a great function for DeFi Saver to write. We should ask him about it.
Rhett, can you summarize the major advantages to something like Gravita over DeFi borrowing protocols like Aave that people are quite used to by this time?
Yeah, so there's two main benefits in using Gravita over say Aave or Maker. One is that if you're a long-term borrower, it is a much lower borrowing experience because you pay a one-time borrow fee and then you never pay interest again ever. And we've seen that with Liquity for ETH, where if you're borrowing for 3 months or more, it's much lower cost than Aave and Maker to just pay that one-time fee. But in our case, since that one-time fee is charged over 6 months, we're still very competitive. It's basically a 1% APR for a short-term borrower. So it's still very competitive from a cost perspective with Aave, Maker, et cetera. So there's the cost aspect, cost to borrow. And then the second benefit of using our system is that we allow a more aggressive loan to value than a lot of these other systems. And so you say, hey, I have X amount of this LST and I want to borrow this. I want to borrow in the place where I would get liquidated at the lowest possible price. And that's going to be our system as well. Again, pointing back to Liquity, when I was working at Wave Financial, I had a client who we had opened up a Liquity loan for. We did this for actually a few clients where we kind of spun them out of BlockFi loans into Liquity loans in order to mostly reduce their borrowing cost. But if you look during kind of that 3AC meltdown, the allowed loan to value was so beneficial that a lot of these positions could have been liquidated on other systems, but were not, because Liquity allows a much higher loan to value. So similar here, only you can now do the same with LSTs.
Rhett, can we talk a little bit more about GRAI? Because that's an enormous feat to stand up a stable coin, and obviously there's lots of work ahead for this, but maybe we can just start with the basics of what does it even stand for, and then if you can talk more about how does it actually hold its peg to the US dollar?
Yeah, that's a great question. So GRAI is the debt token of the system, similar to MakerDAO's DAI or Liquidations USD. And internally, it is always valued at $1. So even if it's trading on the market at $1.10, you can always mint it for $1. And if it's trading below, then you would mint it at $1 as well. These CDP systems, just internally counting those assets at $1, has some natural properties where, if I open a debt position, when it's trading at $1, now it's trading at 90 cents or 80 cents, et cetera. A lot of borrowers will come in and take that as an opportunity to get some free debt forgiveness. Because it's internally valued at $1, I can buy it for less than that. And so I can buy some up and pay back my debt. And I just got, if it's trading at 80 cents, I just get 20% debt forgiveness. So there's some of those natural mechanisms. And similar to the upside, where if I can mint it at $1 and I can sell it into the market for $1.08, then there's an arbitrage there as well. So those are kind of the natural mechanisms of a lot of these CDP platforms. In addition to that, Liquity introduced this concept of redemptions, which basically in the Liquity system, if LUSD falls below the dollar, arbitrageurs can buy up LUSD and they can go to the riskiest borrowers and they can redeem one LUSD for $1 worth of that borrower's ETH. Because it's a one-to-one with no penalty, the borrower, the net value of their position remains the same, but their ETH exposure reduces. So you still don't want to be redeemed against if you're one of those people, but it helps. They call it their hard pegging mechanism, and it works really well. Gravita also has redemptions, but they're not turned on yet. And so we would like the system to settle down a little bit first and kind of grow a little bit, and then just allow those natural kind of what you might call soft peg mechanisms to work first. And when we do first introduce redemptions, that actually will be slightly modified as well. So rather than redeeming $1 for $1 or one LUSD for $1 worth of collateral, we will allow redeemers to redeem one GRAI for 97 cents worth of collateral. So you're kind of handing 3% of the ARB back to the borrower. That's a lever that is very strong. We want to have it in place when needed, but we don't want it to be pulled very often. So we're just, we're not introducing it at first. And then when we do introduce it, it'll come with like a little bit of a softening, you might call it. And then lastly, the other really important, what you would call like kind of soft peg measure, is you just want it to be really attractive for people to come in and liquidity provide, GRAI, USDC, or participate in the stability pool. Those sorts of things just naturally create stability for that token. And so that's where a lot of incentives and partnerships and things like that will come in as well. And you really want to lean, for these systems to work in kind of an optimal fashion, you want to lean into that pretty strongly, where, it's really attractive for people to liquidity provide. It's attractive for people to be in the stability pool. It's attractive for people to come in and pay down debt or increase debt depending on the movement of the price. And then you have some of these like more heavy-handed measures there in case of emergency. And we did see that with Liquity during the USDC depeg. Liquity defended the most quickly because redemptions fired up. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it's great in times of emergency, but you don't want to be overly relying on it.
I think one thing that we all learned in the past year during the bear market is that liquidations are really important to the health of a protocol. So one of the underlying mechanisms here is the stability pool, which some might be familiar with from Liquity, but just in case they're new to Liquity or Gravita, can you just dumb down what's the stability pool, and also what sort of yields are folks potentially going to earn in that stability pool?
That's a great question. So the stability pool, it's pretty simple. Anyone can deposit GRAI into the stability pool. And when a person gets over levered, when a liquidation gets triggered, the stability pool basically burns that person's debt. And then their collateral is pro rata distributed amongst the stability pool to depositors. Because liquidations happen, at an LTV of 90% for ETH or 85% for rETH and stETH, all the stability pool participants are getting those assets at either a 10 or a 15% market discount, which is great for them, which then you can just hold on to, or you could sell right back into GRAI if you wanted to take profits. So a couple of things about expected kind of profitability in those. Let's assume you're a person who wants to immediately sell it back into profits. If you look at Liquity as a guide, you'll notice that the stability pool yield has kind of an inverse relationship to the market. When the market is dumping hard, the yield of that pool goes way up because liquidations have increased. So during the 3AC meltdown, the stability pool in Liquity was generating like a 750% APR. And then right now it's more like a 3 or 4%. The Liquity stability pool currently has kind of a baseline level of profitability because they are emitting LQTY tokens at it. Gravita currently is not. We don't have a token live. And so it doesn't have that baseline. But I would expect a few things. One, I would expect it to kind of be a yield source that operates inverse to the market, a little bit like the Liquity one does. And my personal expectation is that it'll probably have a higher baseline level of activity because we accept more collateral types and because that one-time borrow fee is charged over 6 months. it becomes a more attractive place for both. It's still attractive for the safe borrowers, but it's more attractive for the riskier borrowers as well. And so my personal expectation is that the amount of activity has a higher baseline, but operates similarly, where not a lot of activity in as the market is either very stable or up, and when the market is crashing, then it becomes very active. So it's this interesting thing where if you say, hey, I want a yield source that becomes higher yielding whenever the market is in its worst state, stability pools are a great place to be.
EtherFi is a fundamentally new kind of staking protocol for Ethereum. EtherFi is the only protocol that allows stakers to retain control of their keys while delegating staking, and allows others to build services on top of delegated staking infrastructure. What makes EtherFi different? EtherFi is the only staking protocol where stakers retain control of their keys, which means that even if the protocol gets attacked, or if the node operators get in trouble, you can always get your Ether back. EtherFi introduces a new fun way to stake called EtherFan, where you get rewarded the longer you stake. When you stake your Ether with EtherFi, you mint a provably rare NFT that you can use to earn membership points and get boosted staking rewards. Revenue from these services is shared between stakers and operators, which further boosts your staking rewards and node operator revenues. To learn more, go to ether.fi and ether.fan. Meet Stater Labs, a non-custodial multi-chain liquid staking platform. With over 40,000 users across 6 chains, Stater is just about to launch ETHX, a decentralized liquid staking token on Ethereum. Backed by some of the biggest names in crypto, their multiple audits with top security firms, bug bounties, and real-time monitoring are a testimony to their emphasis on security and safety. With a unique multi-pool architecture and tokenomics, ETHX empowers stakers everywhere to run a node with as little as 4 ETH and earn 35% more than solo stakers. Sign up for their ETHX Alpha today and be the first to know about $1 million in staker rewards. Ethereum is fully decentralized, and Liquity is a shining example of decentralization. Liquity is a non-upgradable protocol where users can deposit their ETH and take out a loan interest-free. Users get their loans in LUSD, an unstoppable Ethereum native stablecoin that is solely backed by Ether. You can use Liquity to buy real-world assets or to earn yield across 20-plus places in DeFi. More risk-tolerant users can also use the protocol to lever up on their ETH. With over 750 million worth of ETH locked into Liquity's unstoppable contracts, get access to real DeFi. DeFi that's immutable, capital efficient, and fully decentralized. Learn more at liquity.org. Rhett, you mentioned the 0.5% that's charged upon opening a vessel. Can you remind us, I thought that there's a refund for those who borrow less than 6 months, and I never quite understood, is that just a launch incentive for now to sort of bootstrap the system, or is that programmed in, intended for the long term?
Great question. That's planned to be a permanent feature. So you pay a minimum of 1 week's worth of borrowing, but we pro rata charge it over the 6 months via refund. So you pay it up front and then you get a refund on repayment. And it's specifically due to what I mentioned, where Liquity is really great for long-term borrowers. But if you want to borrow for a week or two, and there's reasons to do that, Aave tends to be a better place to be. We really want to be a very compelling place for both types of borrower. And we feel like both types of borrower are symbiotic with each other, basically. And so that is not a kind of one-time promotion. That is, if you come in 5 years and open up a position, it'll be that same sort of mechanism.
Switching gears a bit, how do you plan to decentralize ownership of the protocol? I think you alluded to, there is a governance token coming. Will that have any other further utility within Gravita?
Yeah, great question. So there will be a governance token. Unlike Liquity, we're not immutable. We obviously will need to be able to onboard new collateral types and do some other things like that. And so that requires governance. We didn't launch with the token. There's some reasons for that. For one, we think that it's possible to kind of mask a lack of product market fit if you launch with a heavy incentive campaign, et cetera. So that token will be coming, and when it does, governance is one of the key features of the token. Most of that token will be going to the community rather than insiders, And like I said, governance is a key part of that, of its functionality. There will be other functionality beyond just governance. I'm going to hold off on commenting exactly on that, on the details of that right now, but I'll tell you the way that we think about it is we want the Gov token to add value to the system, essentially. And so we want the tokenomics to function in such a way that that it benefits the system and it benefits from the system. And so we want those incentives to be highly aligned. And so there's some things that we're thinking about that, like I said, we'll announce later on. It'll be governance plus some other functionality.
So my understanding is you had 2 audits. One of the audits turned up an issue that you've addressed in your docs, and just wanted to give you a chance to elaborate a bit on this. But in a nutshell, it says, Gravita needs a smart contract that is able to mint and burn GRAI to allow for L2 deployments. Can you talk about like what was flagged by the auditors and then why that exists, and maybe like what does the future look like in terms of whether that will remain, or is that something that would eventually be removed in the future with like upgrades of the protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to clarify, we actually did have 3 audits. One of them was an audit competition, but 2 traditional audits and then a third competition. And loved all of them. So yeah, there is this function that allows for there to be unbacked GRAI minted. And the reason why that exists is as we deploy to the L2s, the plan is to basically whitelist the say an instance on Arbitrum, that instance itself can mint GRAI to kind of seed GRAI into its own instance to allow for borrowing at the L2. That's the reason why it exists. That GRAI would be only minted by basically whitelisted contracts, and those contracts would be these L2 instances. And then we have a large multi-sig to even whitelist one of those contracts that includes both team members and trusted community members. That's how that functions. Is it possible to be turned off in the future? Yes. One, if we do not plan to deploy to any other L2s, and maybe each of those L2s has enough GRAI seeded into their system, or 2, if we found a better way to facilitate that did not include this functionality, then we could turn that off and not have it anymore. So there's possibilities there. That's the reason for its existence. And that same multi-sig that includes team members and people in the community is the multi-sig that will also be required to approve smart contract upgrades. So we're not immutable like Liquity is. We will have upgrades, at least for the time being. And that's one of the safety measures that we have. And then one other is we have time locks on those things as well. So even if we get everyone to sign for one of these things, it won't come into effect for 2 days.
Is the long-term goal to be as immutable as something like Liquity, or do you think there's drawbacks to that immutability or censorship resistance that we all admire about Liquity?
So we would like to get as close to that as we possibly can. Governance minimization, as much hardening as we can. If it's possible in the future to get all the way there to pure immutability without giving up some things that we find pretty important, I would love that. I don't know if that will be possible. We may always need, for instance, to be able to onboard new collateral types. But it's possible that maybe the L2s get really mature, and so does the liquid staking ecosystem, et cetera. And we could say, okay, at this point, we're just going to turn the whole thing completely immutable and not worry about being able to onboard some new LST. That is a possibility. But what I expect to be a higher, more probable is that we'll just get to kind of governance minimization. Right now, we also have a lot of what we think are really killer features that we want to add over the next few years. And so that's another reason that we're not immutable just yet. But, once we get through some of those roadmap items, Our goal is to, like I said, start hardening the protocol as much as we possibly can, and tracking toward the immutability of Liquity as much as we can. Maybe all the way there, it's possible. I think highly censorship resistant, highly resilient stablecoins like Liquity are amazing, extremely needed. I think LUSD is basically a public good. That's partly why we're trying to be as friendly to them as possible. We hope that as we grow, they are benefited in a big way. And if we can get all the way there, great. If we can get 90% of the way there, that's really great as well.
Rhett, you've kind of alluded to expanding to some other L2s. Do you have somewhat of a predetermined path on where you think you're going to go next, or what's top of mind to hop to after mainnet?
That's a great question. We've been in talks with several of the L2s, and we love lots of them. We'd like to be on many of them, not just one. You could say, similar to how we think about liquid staking tokens, that we want to be the home of all high-quality LSTs, we also want to be deployed on all high-quality L2s. Which one we go to first, I won't announce just yet, but we are in discussions with those, and then also just seeking community feedback. We've been pretty active in the Discord asking, okay, which of the L2s would people most be interested in using, and where the highest demand is where we would go first, but we'd like to go to all of them that kind of meet a certain quality threshold.
Rhett, do you know off the top of your head which L2 has the most staked ETH? My gut would be Arbitrum, but maybe Optimism.
Arbitrum has the highest TVL in total, so I would guess that the liquid stake tokens are the same, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, this is probably a good place for us to wrap up. We normally like to conclude these quick hits with asking you if there's any upcoming alpha you can share with our listeners. So it can be related here to Gravita, but if there's anything else in DeFi that you're really excited for, also welcome to share that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of both. So, we're obviously pretty focused on getting to the L2s relatively quickly, so keep an eye out for that. We also are looking to support liquidity provisioning positions as collateral in the near future as well. So take your favorite LST that we support. We'd also love to support that paired with ETH on a DEX as collateral, and those can be pretty attractive and in some cases even more productive than the LST itself. So keep an eye out for that. Things that I'm watching for, there's a lot of upcoming liquid staking projects that have unique approaches that I am following and I'm excited about. Really excited about Stakewise V3. I'm excited about Diva and others. I don't mean to leave any out. And I'm really excited about a lot of the things happening on L2s that have nothing to do with us. So there's some really cool derivatives projects and perps exchanges and things on the L2s that are starting to emerge. And so that's an area that I follow pretty closely.
Well, I want to remind listeners they should check out Gravita. They can learn more at gravitaprotocol.com. They should follow you on Twitter at Rhett, Shipp, just full name there. And that's on Twitter as well. And then the Gravita Protocol, which is Gravita Protocol, just all one word. And that's the handle there for Twitter. But Rhett, anything else you'd recommend in terms of folks learning about Gravita or wanting to follow you and the team there at Gravita?
Sure. Yeah. Our Discord is very active, and we stay in there pretty often to come in and answer questions, etc. And we even will host like little kind of casual Discord hangouts and occasionally Twitter spaces as well if you want to come in and prefer to operate on text rather than voice. So yeah, I would recommend coming to the Discord.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're a talented founder or developer, please consider reaching out to our team at fourthrevolution.capital. And for future episodes of the Edge podcast, please check out our link tree at edge_pod.